Imagine standing in a courtroom, pulling out a checkbook, and saying these exact words to a judge: "Your Honor, how much is this going to cost? Just tell me the number, and we can end this right now." That's exactly what happened in Judge Frank Caprio's Providence Municipal Court when the 23-year-old son of one of the most powerful CEOs in Rhode Island thought his family's money could make his problems disappear. The courtroom fell silent. The bailiff's jaw dropped. Even the court clerk stopped typing mid-sentence. And Judge Caprio? The same judge known worldwide for his compassion, his wisdom, and his viral moments of humanity? He leaned forward in his chair, removed his glasses, and delivered a response so powerful, so unexpected, that it didn't just change the outcome of this case, it changed this young man's entire life. But here's what makes this story truly incredible. By the end of this video, you're going to witness one of the most stunning transformations ever captured on camera in a courtroom. Stay with me. Before we dive into what happened that day, you need to understand why this moment was so significant and why it shocked everyone who witnessed it. Judge Frank Caprio isn't your typical municipal court judge. For over 4 decades, he has presided over traffic and ordinance violations in Providence, Rhode Island. But what sets him apart isn't the cases he handles, it's how he handles them. His show, Caught in Providence, has amassed billions of views across YouTube and social media. Billions. And the reason is simple. In a world where we've become cynical about the justice system, Judge Caprio reminds us that compassion and accountability can coexist. He's the judge who reduced a struggling single mother's fine after learning she was working 3 jobs to feed her children. He's the judge who dismissed a ticket for an elderly veteran who got lost driving to his wife's grave. He's the judge who invites children to the bench and teaches them about responsibility in ways they'll never forget. But make no mistake, Judge Caprio is not a pushover. Behind that warm smile is a man who has seen every trick, every excuse, and every manipulation tactic known to humanity. He's watched people lie straight to his face. He's heard sob stories crafted to avoid accountability. And when someone tries to game the system, when someone shows complete disregard for the very principles his courtroom stands for, that's when you see the other side of Judge Caprio. And on the day Marcus Wellington III walked into his courtroom, the world was about to see exactly that. The Wellington family name carried serious weight in Rhode Island. Marcus Wellington II had built a tech empire from scratch, growing his company from a small startup in his garage to a multi-billion-dollar corporation employing thousands across the Northeast. He was featured on magazine covers. He donated to charities. He sat on the boards of hospitals and universities. Politicians courted his endorsement. His success story was taught in business schools as a model of American entrepreneurship. And his son, Marcus Wellington III? He had been raised in the shadow of that success. Private schools, luxury cars, international vacations, and a sense of entitlement that money can't help but breed when you've never had to earn anything. At 23 years old, Marcus III had already been involved in 3 previous traffic incidents, all handled quietly, all settled out of court, all disappeared from public record through expensive lawyers and strategic connections. But this time was different. This time, he couldn't escape Judge Caprio's courtroom. The incident that brought Marcus III before Judge Caprio happened on a Thursday evening in downtown Providence. According to the police report, Marcus was driving his father's $200,000 Bentley Continental at nearly 60 miles per hour in a 30-mile-per-hour zone. He ran a red light at the corner of Westminster and Mathewson Street, one of the busiest pedestrian intersections in the city. But that wasn't the worst of it. When Officer Patricia Moreno pulled him over, Marcus refused to roll down his window at first. When he finally did, he allegedly told her, "Do you know who my father is? Make this disappear, or you'll be directing traffic in the worst precinct in the state by Monday." Officer Moreno didn't flinch. She wrote him up for speeding, running a red light, and failure to comply with a lawful order. When Marcus tried to refuse the ticket, she informed him calmly that he could explain himself to a judge. And that's exactly what happened. The morning Marcus Wellington III was scheduled to appear, something unusual happened. The regular crowd of court observers seemed to grow. Word had spread that the Wellington heir was facing Judge Caprio, and people wanted to witness it firsthand. Marcus arrived 15 minutes late, already a sign of disrespect in Judge Caprio's courtroom, where punctuality is considered a basic measure of character. He was dressed impeccably, a tailored navy suit, Italian leather shoes, a watch that cost more than most people's cars. He walked in with his attorney, a high-powered defense lawyer known for getting wealthy clients out of sticky situations. The clerk called his name, Marcus Wellington III. Marcus approached the bench with the casual confidence of someone who had never faced a consequence he couldn't buy his way out of. Judge Caprio reviewed the file in front of him. His expression was neutral, but those who knew him could see the slight tightening around his eyes. "Mr. Wellington," Judge Caprio began, "you're here today on charges of speeding, running a red light, and failure to comply with Officer Marino's instructions. How do you plead?" Before Marcus could speak, his attorney jumped in. "Your Honor, my client pleads not guilty to all charges. We believe there are mitigating circumstances that warrant dismissal of this case." Judge Caprio raised an eyebrow. "Mitigating circumstances? Please enlighten me." The attorney launched into a prepared speech about Marcus's charitable contributions, his standing in the community, and how a conviction could unfairly tarnish his reputation. Judge Caprio listened patiently. When the attorney finished, he turned directly to Marcus. "Mr. Wellington, I've heard from your lawyer. Now I want to hear from you. In your own words, what happened that evening?" Marcus shifted uncomfortably. He clearly wasn't used to explaining himself. "Look, Your Honor, I was in a hurry. I had somewhere important to be. Maybe I was going a little fast, but nobody got hurt. This whole thing is a waste of everyone's time." The courtroom murmured. Judge Caprio's expression didn't change. "A waste of time," he repeated slowly. "Tell me, Mr. Wellington, do you know what happens at the intersection of Westminster and Mathewson at 6 o'clock on a Thursday evening?" Marcus shrugged. "People crossing the street, I guess." "People crossing the street," Judge Caprio nodded. "Families. Children coming from after-school programs. Elderly folks walking to dinner. Students heading to the library. Real people, Mr. Wellington, whose lives could have ended because you were in a hurry." Marcus's attorney tried to interject, but Judge Caprio held up his hand. "I'm not finished. Mr. Wellington, I've reviewed your file. This isn't your first offense. I see a pattern here, a pattern of someone who believes rules apply to everyone except himself. And what concerns me more than the speeding, more than the red light, is what you said to Officer Moreno. He read from the report. Do you know who my father is? Make this disappear, or you'll be directing traffic in the worst precinct in the state by Monday." Judge Caprio set down the paper and looked directly at Marcus. "Did you say those words, Mr. Wellington?" Marcus's face flushed. "I was upset. I didn't mean, did you say those words? Yes or no?" A long pause. "Yes." "And did you believe, in that moment, that your family's position gave you the right to threaten a police officer doing her job?" Silence. And that's when Marcus made the biggest mistake of his life. Marcus straightened his tie, regaining some of his earlier arrogance. He glanced at his attorney, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. "Your Honor," Marcus said, his voice taking on a businesslike tone, "let's cut to the chase. How much is this going to cost?" "Whatever the fine is, I'll pay it right now. Double it, even. I'll write a check for $50,000 to whatever charity you want. Just tell me the number, and we can end this." He actually reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a checkbook. The courtroom gasped. Judge Caprio went very still. The bailiff took a step forward, uncertain of what was happening. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. And then Judge Caprio did something no one expected. He laughed. Not a mocking laugh. Not an angry laugh. A soft, almost sad laugh of disbelief. "Mr. Wellington," he said quietly, "put that checkbook away. You've just shown me everything I needed to see." What Judge Caprio said next has been shared millions of times across social media. It has been quoted in law school classes. It has brought grown men and women to tears. "Son, I want you to look around this courtroom. Look at the other people waiting for their cases to be heard. Do you see the woman in the third row? She's here because she got a parking ticket while rushing her diabetic mother to a doctor's appointment. She works 2 jobs and barely makes rent. She's terrified because she can't afford the fine. Do you see the young man in the blue shirt? He's 19 years old. He got pulled over because his taillight was out. He couldn't afford to fix it because he's saving every penny to take care of his grandmother who raised him. These people don't have checkbooks that can make problems disappear. They don't have fathers whose names open doors. They have to face the consequences of their actions just like everyone else. And you know what, Mr. Wellington? So do you. Judge Caprio leaned forward. Justice is not for sale. Not in my courtroom. Not anywhere. The moment we allow wealth to determine who faces accountability and who doesn't, we stop being a society of laws. We become a society of money. And I absolutely refuse to be a part of that. Marcus's attorney tried to speak, but Judge Caprio cut him off. Counselor, I've heard enough. You can save your arguments for the appeal if your client chooses to file one. Marcus Wellington III, on the charge of speeding, I find you guilty. On the charge of running a red light, I find you guilty. On the charge of failure to comply, I find you guilty. Marcus went pale. But here's what I'm going to do, and I want you to listen very carefully. Judge Caprio paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was gentler. I'm not going to send you to jail. I'm not going to fine you. You've already shown me that money means nothing to you. A fine would be no punishment at all. Marcus looked confused. Instead, I'm ordering the following: 100 hours of community service at the Providence homeless shelter. Not writing checks. Not attending galas. Actually serving food. Actually listening to the stories of people who have nothing. 100 hours, Mr. Wellington. The courtroom stirred. Additionally, I'm ordering you to ride along with police officers for 30 hours total. You're going to see what they deal with every day. You're going to understand why Officer Moreno deserves your respect, not your threats. Marcus's attorney started to protest about his client's schedule, his business obligations. Judge Caprio held up his hand one final time. And one more thing. I'm ordering you to write a letter of apology to Officer Moreno. A real letter. Not something drafted by your lawyers. Not something your assistant typed up. Your words. Your handwriting. Your genuine reflection on how you treated someone who was simply doing her job. You will deliver that letter to her in person, and you will look her in the eye when you do it. Marcus stared at Judge Caprio, speechless for the first time in his life. Case continued for compliance. I'll see you back here in 90 days. And Mr. Wellington. Marcus looked up. This is your chance to become the man your family name deserves. Don't waste it. What happened over the next 3 months would become one of the most remarkable transformations ever witnessed in Judge Caprio's courtroom. Marcus Wellington III showed up for his first day at the homeless shelter expecting to fulfill his hours as quickly as possible and return to his privileged life. But something unexpected happened. On his second day, he met a man named Robert. Robert was 57 years old, a former accountant who had lost everything after his wife's cancer treatments drained their savings. He'd been living on the streets for 3 years. Marcus sat down and listened to Robert's story for 2 hours. He learned that Robert had once lived in the same neighborhood where Marcus grew up. He learned that Robert's daughter was Marcus's age and had moved away because she couldn't bear to see her father struggle. For the first time in his life, Marcus saw that the distance between privilege and poverty was paper-thin. During his police ride-alongs, Marcus witnessed Officer Moreno responding to a domestic violence call. He watched her de-escalate a potentially deadly situation with nothing but her words and her courage. He saw her comfort a child who had witnessed violence in his own home. And he began to understand what it meant to serve others. When Marcus Wellington III walked back into Judge Caprio's courtroom 90 days later, he was a different person. Gone was the tailored suit. He wore a simple button-down shirt and khakis. Gone was the arrogant posture. He stood before the bench with his shoulders humbled. And he wasn't alone. Behind him sat his father, Marcus Wellington II, the powerful CEO who could have made phone calls, who could have pressured officials, who could have made this entire situation disappear. But he hadn't. Because when he learned what Judge Caprio had ordered, Marcus Wellington II did something that surprised everyone, including his son. He said, "This is exactly what you needed." Judge Caprio reviewed the compliance reports. 100 hours of community service completed. 30 hours of police ride-alongs completed. The letter to Officer Moreno delivered. Mr. Wellington, Judge Caprio said, "Do you have anything you'd like to say to the court?" Marcus took a deep breath. "Your Honor, 3 months ago, I walked into this courtroom believing that my family's money made me special. I believed that rules were for other people. I believed that my time was more valuable than anyone else's. I was wrong. I met people at that shelter who taught me more about dignity and resilience in 10 hours than I learned in 4 years of business school. I watched police officers risk their lives every single day, not for recognition, not for wealth, but because they believe in protecting their communities. And I wrote that letter to Officer Moreno. And when I delivered it, she told me something I'll never forget. She said, 'Everyone makes mistakes. What matters is what you do next.' Your Honor, I don't know if I deserve forgiveness. But I want you to know I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to earn it." The courtroom was silent. And then something happened that brought everyone to tears. Judge Caprio stood up from his bench, something he almost never does, and walked down to where Marcus was standing. He extended his hand. "Mr. Wellington, that took courage. Real courage. The kind of courage that doesn't come from money or power. The kind that comes from looking in the mirror and deciding to be better." They shook hands. Case dismissed. In the months following his court appearance, Marcus Wellington III made headlines again, but for very different reasons. He used his family's connections not to escape accountability, but to launch a foundation providing job training and housing assistance to homeless individuals in Rhode Island. Within 2 years, the Wellington Fresh Start initiative had helped over 2,000 people get back on their feet. He established a scholarship fund for children of police officers killed or injured in the line of duty. And every Thanksgiving, without fail, Marcus Wellington III serves meals at the Providence homeless shelter, right alongside Robert, who is no longer homeless, thanks to a job Marcus personally helped him secure. Officer Patricia Moreno was promoted to sergeant. At her ceremony, she received a commendation, nominated by Marcus himself. And Judge Frank Caprio? He continued doing what he's always done, dispensing justice with compassion, reminding the world that courtrooms aren't just about punishment. They're about transformation. This story isn't just about a wealthy young man who got humbled in court. It's about something much deeper. It's about the illusion of invincibility that wealth can create, and how that illusion can trap us in a prison of our own making. It's about the blindness that comes from never having to struggle, never having to face consequences, never having to see the world through someone else's eyes. But it's also about hope. Because Marcus Wellington III didn't have to change. He could have filed appeals. He could have used his connections to undermine Judge Caprio. He could have completed his community service with resentment in his heart and returned to his old ways the moment he walked out of that courtroom. But he didn't. He chose transformation. He chose accountability. He chose to become the person that his circumstances had never required him to be. And that's the most powerful lesson of all. It doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter what mistakes you've made. It doesn't matter how lost you think you are. What matters is what you do next. Judge Caprio showed us something that day that we desperately need to remember in a world that often feels divided by wealth, by status, by power. Justice isn't about punishment. It's about restoration. It's about giving people the chance to become better versions of themselves and holding them accountable enough that they actually do it. That's why his courtroom has touched billions of hearts around the world. That's why people from every country, every background, every walk of life watch these videos and feel something stir inside them. Because in a world that can feel cynical and hopeless, Judge Caprio reminds us that compassion and accountability aren't opposites. They're partners. And when they work together, miracles happen. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that transformation is possible for anyone, then do me a favor, hit that like button, not for me, but because this message deserves to spread.